Over to you, Maddie. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
We definitely coordinated our outfits, by the way, so I hope you like it. And also, let us know if you can't hear us over there. This is a very...
I might go over here.
Yes.
Is that okay? So we can divide the room.
Okay, divide and
feel?
conquer. I might go first if that's all right.
So this is, we are, by the way, delighted to be sharing the stage with this incredible young woman. So thank you for agreeing, actually. I think it's great fun. Thanks for being here. Are we feeling good?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, I'm Maddie. It's lovely to meet you all. And again, I'm really excited to be sharing the stage with Karen. She is totally awesome. And I think we bring two different perspectives on something that's super important, which is all about communication and visibility on the sciences. So just a little bit about me. I started out as a medical scientist, super technical. I was alone in the lab a lot. I mean, you might be able to tell I'm quite an extroverted person, so that didn't necessarily bode well for me. I would often sort of forget about my experiments and like go and talk to people and then come back and then it's boiled over or the mice have run away. So I realized quite quickly that I was more interested in the science communication aspect of things. And that's what I'm really excited to talk about today, is how that's important and some basic tips and tricks about how to do it.
Yeah.
So
before you start, Maddie, I might just explain the sort of the session set up today.
Oh, yes, of course.
I can see that my slide's up here, so I'm happy if you want me to go first. That means you don't have to all look at that, which relates to what I'm going to be talking about. But what we're going to do is talk individually for a couple of minutes, 5 to 7 minutes or so. And then after that, so we're looking at the science of communication from our own perspectives. And then after that, we're going to be doing some Q&A and doing a bit more of a panel discussion. And we would love to hear some of your questions. If you have them, then you can let the moderator know what they are, and then we can talk one-on-one with you about some of the things you'd like to know a little bit more about. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, that sounds good. So is it we're doing a little chat,
Yeah.
Each of us talking a little bit about ourselves and our tips and tricks, and then we've got a bit of time at the end for some questions from you guys.
Yeah, fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks. Did you want to take it away?
Yeah,
then,
I think
Karen?
because I've got my slide up here. Okay, so as you can tell, we're free-flowing there, which is great. So hello and welcome. My name is Karen Eck, and as you heard earlier, I'm a visibility specialist. So what that really means is I've worked as a publicist my entire life. So my career has been putting individuals and brands in the spotlight. So I'm not the one usually standing up and talking to people about what I know, but this is what I'm now doing with the power of visibility, and that's all around helping teams and individuals to step forward. And why that's important is that everyone has a story to tell, and everyone has skills and expertise. But I think we probably agree that unless we learn how to communicate that we communicate our knowledge, we miss opportunities. So I guess the thing that matters here is, and why visibility matters, is that if we don't take the opportunity to connect, to share what we know with other people, the doors may not open. And for some people, they may miss opportunities. They may not get the promotion they're looking for. Someone else might get the credit for something they've been working really hard on, just because they have a little bit more confidence. So I would ask you, really think about, and I do ask 2 key questions in the power of visibility. What would a greater professional profile do for you? And that is, what would a greater profile do for you professionally, if you like? Have to think about that for a second. And then also, what are the sorts of things that might hold you back? And from my experience in working with people, they often fall in around 4 categories. And this is despite the industry, actually. So I've worked with economists, I've worked with data scientists, I've worked with people who would consider themselves really comfortable in the spotlight. But when it comes to barriers, they fall in 4 categories. The first is sort of lack of confidence. Second is lack of know-how, so it's your strategy. Third is personality. So, we all know that half the world's population probably identify as introverts. And arguably, when, we're talking about people who work in this industry, in the associated industries, many of you may find or feel that you don't find the spotlight very comfortable at all, or being communicative and being visible. So personality, you'd rather go and have a dental procedure. And the fourth is a sense of overwhelm. So if we get really bogged down, we just think this is just too hard. So the result is you do nothing at all, and then nothing changes. So nothing comes from nothing, right? So those 4 barriers are really, really common, and everyone, I think, can relate to at least 1 or 2 of those. So what you need to do is think about, well, what are some of the tips and tricks that we would apply to stepping forward a little bit? And the power of visibility is all about that. So what I would say is, as a tip, because we're here to share a few of those things, number 1 is to put visibility on the agenda. So what I mean by that is, a physical agenda. Who here, a quick hands if I can, who here runs the show in terms of, running an organisation or runs a business? Who here runs a business? Okay. Who's an employee? Okay, a lot. All right. Who here runs a team? Right. So all of you who put your hands up, keep them up. You run a team. I want you to put visibility on the agenda. So when you have your weekly, monthly catch-ups, and you have like 0.9, it can be 0.10, I don't really care, visibility. And what I want you to do is think about, well, how can we communicate within our team? How can we better communicate with our stakeholders? How can we be engaging with them? That's all visibility. And that is internal as well as external. So number 1 is to put visibility on the agenda. And Maddie will absolutely talk about, well, really the work that she does puts visibility on the agenda with every single video that she does with TikTok. She's communicating that, and she's creating a content plan around her incredible work that she does. Number 2 is to create a culture of visibility. To be honest, doing it alone is really hard. I think no one's as proficient as Maddie here in doing social media and science communication, incredible. But to do it in a team environment for all the employees here, it's super important that people are with you, and it's important for the managers in the room to create that culture. And what that means is if you actually know why you're being visible, for example, it might be simply saying, right, we've got this content we want to push out, and everyone knows why that's important to Sally, who's been leading the project for the last 5 years. This is the moment to talk about it. Sally doesn't want to do it on her own, but if everyone's with her, when she's visible about it, people are with her and they're happy to help her and support her. And that can be shown by liking and commenting, etc., on social media like LinkedIn. Now, Hugh French over there in the corner, give us a little wave. I met you earlier. He doesn't have LinkedIn. This is not to pick on you, Hugh. Who doesn't have LinkedIn here? It's a missed opportunity. I actually think that LinkedIn is probably one of the best platforms to be on for social media, but I'd say for professionals, that is. The reason is that there are a lot of associations and organisations that use LinkedIn. It's not a job hiring tool. Some people use it for that. But if you can still hear me, but it is a really great tool. I would recommend that you look at exploring your LinkedIn profile. So that's another tip for you. So number 1 is visibility on the agenda. Number 2, creating a culture of visibility. Get on LinkedIn and know how to do it. And then, of course, keeping a sense of enthusiasm, accountability, and motivation. So just before I go, I've got on your desk there a little postcard on the workshop series. There is a survey there. Think about your health of your visibility, your health, sort of a health check. Happy for you to fill that out and communicate and connect with me on LinkedIn so we can move your visibility a little bit forward as well. I hope that helps. Over to you, Maddie.
Thank you so much, Karen. That was really awesome, and I feel like you have so many awesome tips, so it will be cool to combine our 2 perspectives into one now. And I guess purple is the combination of our 2 colours, so that is what we're aiming to generate today. So I think I was talking a little bit about my background and how I got to be here. I think it was somewhere around like I kept losing mice in my experiments or things boiling over, something terrible like that. But basically, I'll just jump back into that and then I'll go into the tips about science communication. So when I decided to leave academia, I really knew that I enjoyed science communication and talking to people about different findings, and specifically people from the public who don't have a science background and don't usually read papers or go to conferences and that kind of thing. But at that point, science communication wasn't really a clear pathway, so I sort of had to fall into it a little bit accidentally. I started a blog, I know, in 2021 about science, unpacking different concepts. And I realised that no one was reading that because not many people read blogs these days. And then one day I was like, okay, maybe I need to switch things up a little bit. So what I would really advise to do is to sort of strip everything back to the basics, because someone is more likely to take away from a conversation with you if they take away 80% of the simplified version versus 10% of the really complex detailed version, right? I mean, they might remember Maddie spectroscopy or something, but then they don't know why you're using it or what it does, you know what I mean? The second tip that is really important is to know where your audience is getting their information and to meet them where they're at. So I guess in our fields, we share information in some pretty specific ways, like we go to conferences like this one, or we write papers, or we do seminars, and we have email lists and things like that. But the average everyday person probably isn't learning about science in these ways. I mean, it's pretty rare that you'd get someone off the street like sitting in this audience, you know what I mean? So I think if you have a specific type of person that you'd like to communicate your science to, maybe it's a good idea to think about what platforms they're using to get their information. Is it word of mouth, or is it social media? Like a lot of people do that these days. Is it online? And really shape your communication strategy to that. So that's something I learned. I remember I told you guys that I started a blog a few years ago, and I was really interested in communicating with my friends who are in their 20s about science. And I just didn't think that no one in their 20s reads blogs. Like, no offense if you guys have blogs. But yeah, then when I switched to Instagram, where a lot of people my age are doing these things, like it really worked. And I was able to find an audience almost instantly. And my third tip, because I want to make sure that we have time for questions, is about showing your personality. So I feel like sometimes if you're asked to communicate your science to an audience, or maybe you have a media interview about a particular aspect of your work, it can be really tempting to slip into cyborg mode, where you become super professional and super formal, and you sort of like turn the volume dial down on your personality, because you want to be credible and you want people to know that you're a professional. And I think I can totally understand where you're coming from. But average everyday people actually prefer to see some personality so that they can connect with you on a more human level, and therefore they'll trust more what you're saying. There's actually research about this, so particularly people who are millennials and Gen Z actually listen more to news and science information if it's presented in an everyday way by a normal person, whatever that means. So I think, you know, whatever way it works for you, showing your personality could be joking around, or I don't know, if you don't like making jokes, it could be just showing your excitement about your work and like being like, this is actually really cool, or this is interesting, or this is how I felt when I found this result. And it's really powerful when I feel like it builds that trust with the audience and they want to listen. So anyway, those are my 3 rules, or my 3 tips. It's about knowing how your audience likes to receive information and pick up information, how much detail that they're, you know, able to handle, and also not hiding your personality. And I think if you do that, you can really connect with people on these science things, and it's really exciting. So without further ado, I think some questions?
Fantastic.
Having long-standing organisational quality culture issues, quite a mouthful, are there any key communication strategies to drive a cultural shift in the employee-based scientists?
Well, look at us looking at each other.
I feel like that's maybe more...
So can you just repeat the question for me?
Having long-standing organisational quality culture issues,
Oh, yeah.
are there any key communication strategies to drive a cultural shift?
What a great question. So I feel that number one is the culture can be shifted, absolutely. It starts, my personal opinion is, as I mentioned before, you've got to have the cultural shift be leading from the top but supported from within and at every single level of the organisation. And this is this culture of visibility I talked about, this cultural shift. You've got to really you've got to enable people to learn new skills and to practice things. So when it comes to visibility, you've got to have the ability kind of to learn it, but practice it as well. And there are lots of tips and tricks around that. So I actually think that that whoever has asked that question, thank you. I would say that absolutely put a plan in place and make sure that people are getting the training and support that they need and the ability to practice and to enable people to communicate, actually share experiences personally with each other, put visibility on the agenda, I actually think that that is a really important aspect because it enables people to simply talk and to support one another. That's my view. What do you think, Maddie?
No, I love that. And there's one thing I would add to that as well. Pairing people up or having partnerships between different generations is really great in driving change in this particular area. So, I mean, I work at the ABC, so everyone's communicating constantly. You will have to like stop people talking all the time. But if you're working in a different sort of organisation, I think it's really cool to see the strengths of the different types of employees that you have. And one thing I have noticed is that people of the younger generations may be communicating and sort of maybe stream of consciousness talking does come more naturally to us. And I think it's really cool to sort of see that as a strength and pair people up from different generations because we can all learn from each other. Yeah.
What about mentoring, Maddie? I mean, I know that I've heard of some really cool reverse mentoring programs where you actually have a mentor that's mentored by someone of a different generation, because I think we can all learn from each other. And, you know, I have to say, you know, you are technically Gen Z, not Z, but Z.
Z, because anyway.
Okay, that's an American issue. We won't talk about that. But I'm like Gen X. I'm just Gen X. And I just feel that we do actually look at things differently. And you know what the biggest thing that's different is that, and this is my daughter said this to me. She said, you know, you old guys, she goes, you think of like social media, like you just way overthink it. I went, really? Do we way overthink it? And yeah, you angst over your social media posts. Where she said, we just do it because it's more natural to us. And we don't think of visibility as, you know, it's not something that we do, it's something that we are more naturally. And I think this is your domain. You guys do this more naturally because you're sort of digital natives. We think about it a little bit more. So yeah, I think to acknowledge it's a little bit harder for the, you know, anyone above Gen Z, Gen Y, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like if we're talking about online visibility, I mean, there are different types of visibility that you can talk about. Gen Z and Alpha as well, like our natural space is to just be open about ourselves online and to communicate online, and our online presence and our online identity is basically the same as our personal identity. So I think it's really cool to have different perspectives of people who come from this generation and then also people from other generations, and they can all learn from each other.
Can I just add to this? What's different here is, so again, my daughter said, I think you need to explain to people what visibility is, because she thinks of visibility as being something that's natural. What I look at it in terms of visibility, it's actually professional visibility. And I would argue that my daughter, when she's 25, maybe 35, 40, 45, when she's skilled and experienced, she might hit a sort of a crisis of confidence that comes from you're skilled and experienced, but no one knows what you do. Damn it. You know, and you've spent all that time, but you still miss the opportunity to step forward. And this is what the professional visibility is what I work with. It's got actually nothing to do with, this is my opinion, Maddie, about the visibility that we may see from people just telling us what they had for brekkie. You know, like that's different. So I think, you know, the definitions need to be a little clearer. What we mean by visibility, professional visibility is, I think, its own little beast. But then for someone like you are your brand. So then you have this mix.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that it differs generationally. And what I was saying before about showing personality when we communicate science kind of relates to that. I think that there is a space for people to incorporate those sort of personal elements into their professional identity. Maybe not every day what I ate for breakfast, unless, I don't know, unless they're like a breakfast
Unless there's science in it.
Yeah. Maybe they're like a nutritionist or something and I want to know what they're actually eating at all times. But I think that what's really cool to see at the moment is people incorporating those like personal elements into their communication. And if they're scientists, actually talking about their lives and how they find the science important to them. So, yeah.
Is there another question before
We've had a few more. Can you hear me? No? No. So we've had a few more questions come through. How do you promote the importance of non-sexy science? Routine testing, not like rocket science, to a younger audience.
Over to you.
Well, first of all, I love the question, but I have to disagree. I think there's no such thing as non-sexy science. Like, I think that's something we can probably see actually with some of NADA's most recent social media content. It's all about just finding the message and the way to frame the science in a way that excites people. Because I feel like I talk to a lot of scientists in my work, interviewing them about their research and creating content together. And there are some people who do some really technical stuff, or stuff that you wouldn't necessarily find easy to explain in like a pithy sentence, right? But I've never been bored, and I've never been like, okay, there's nothing interesting here to talk about. I think it's all about just finding the story in what they do and what you do, and then finding a way to communicate that to different audiences. So yeah, I've been really impressed and interested by all of your work, going to some of the sessions, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like the accreditation and conformance space is probably one of those areas where you don't necessarily see a clear path to that headline necessarily. But some of the stories that I've heard and some of the research that I've seen over the past couple of days has been really fascinating, and I can see really amazing stories coming from that. So yeah, I think it's all just about the framing.
Great, we've got some questions building up. We do have time, so
Great.
this next one's for you, Karen. What are some of those tricks and tips that you mentioned to shift culture?
Well, I think that the first thing I mentioned earlier is to put visibility on the agenda. That's just really, I'm just going to bang on about that because it's so incredibly important. So everyone who put their hand up to say that they are someone who manages an agenda, please put it on the agenda and start the conversation. And what does it look like? I think you need to start a plan. I know that sounds logical, but you're all detail-minded people and probably love an Excel spreadsheet. But a plan is really about what's coming up that is super important for what you're doing. Now, it could be you personally, it could be the project, could be the company, the industry, what's happening. And I like to put those, on the visibility plan, it's like the nuggets of gold, and we're all really busy. So you've got to pull from those, the gold from that. You've got to say, right, this is the thing I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to communicate to the people that are important to me. So you've got to figure out who your audiences are. Like Maddie talks about, her audience is critically important. Your audience can be, you've got an internal audience. These can be the teams you're working with, how you're communicating to them. Think about how they're getting information. So one quick example on this is like a newsletter. Remember that I think the newsletter is the actual original communication, internal communication and external communication, where you had remember the pieces of paper that used to pile up next on a desk somewhere and it'd be like a newsletter? Now everything's delivered electronically. But even if you think about, well, how are people getting their information internally? Can you add to that in terms of storytelling? Maybe there's a project you've been working on, and finally you've really achieved something great. Who are you communicating that to? And you've got a marketing department, you've got a PR department potentially, you've got people who are they're the experts. I would recommend 100% know and learn how to work with them a little better. So if you're out in the field, think about, what, I've got an iPhone. Every iPhone is pretty good. Could you take a photograph of the big cheese here and the other big cheese over there, and get a photograph that might be all the key players? It's not hard. You hand someone the phone and say, would you mind taking a photograph? You might feel a bit awkward. Just put that to one side. Don't worry about it. Just say, just got to get this because Sally in marketing needs it. You can then give that to her and say, look, I know you've got a newsletter coming out in a month or a week. This is really significant for us. And this is a really good moment. I'd love to share it with the team, because this is about the team. It's actually not about you. It's about the team and the great work that you're doing. That's great. And look, Sally goes, God, thank you. Didn't even know that was happening. So you might think people are aware of the great work you're doing. They're absolutely not. So my top tip is, don't assume that people know what you do, because you haven't told them.
That is so true. Can I just add one thing to that? It got my mind whirring. I used to work in media and communications at UNSW, working with scientists to promote what they do and share that with the audiences. And I can definitely say, I did not know what most people did, but then whenever they reached out to me to tell me about a new project that they were doing or a conference that they went to, or if they had a photo, I was like, oh, that's incredible. I was always really happy to receive that. So if you do get close and work with the PR and marketing teams and social media teams at your organisation, I can definitely say they'll appreciate that. And there's always a place where they can put that content. And
that's right. So it's actually, they get a chance to leverage it, right?
Yeah.
So you're giving your clients and the people that are important You're reminding them of the great work you've just done. And you've just said, here's something we took, and you're letting them know. And they'll go, great, we'll share it on our newsletter or our communications going out. And suddenly, you've just grown the audience for that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they'll work together with you to shape that message, and they might have access to a platform you didn't even know existed. So I definitely saw that at UNSW. It's a really great collaboration process with the academics and the people working there. So definitely encourage you guys, if you do have institutional communication teams, to use those people.
Yeah. I love that.
Great. A couple more questions. This one's got a bit of interest on the app. So is the visibility also seen as credibility?
Oh, good question. Is visibility also seen as credibility? My personal view is 100%, but you need to back it up. So just being visible isn't going to cut it. And I think people see through that really pretty quickly. So it is credibility, and it builds credibility. So, you know, as a publicist, that's everything that I did, was to build credibility, and it was to raise awareness of a person or a product or something or an organisation. And it does build the credibility, because people want to know how they can trust you and why they can trust you with that information, and you've got to back it up with the goods. So, yeah. Do you have a view on that, Maddie?
I completely agree. I feel like, to an extent, just getting your information and your name out there and being visible does really help with credibility, but that only goes up to a certain point, and then you actually have to be able to back it up with the expertise, with the right information. And yeah, I think we do see a lot of people, like they're sort of flashes in the pan. They'll come up and they'll have a big story, or they'll say that they're an expert in X, Y, Z. I mean, I see this a lot in the social media field. But generally speaking, if they don't have the goods to back it up and the right background and the right information and all the hard work that goes along with it, it will be a flash in the pan. So yeah, I think it's a combination of being visible and promoting, but also having all the hard work that goes underneath that.
Can I also say, I think the most important thing before even thinking about credibility is to have the purpose in the first place. So to really know why you want to communicate. So you have a passion for communicating science because you want people to better understand weird science, right? You're the best weird science, platform there. But really understanding why you want to communicate that information. So if you really understand it and go, I'm so passionate about this, this, and this, it actually takes the personalisation out of it in terms of the awkwardness, because you can feel awkward, but people won't necessarily know that. It really just means that, look, I need to do this because it's important, because I need to communicate X, Y, and Z. If you just put the purpose front and centre, and it gives you the reason, it just means that you just need to worry less about the why. You've got that sorted already. Why am I doing that? So put purpose front.
Great, thank you. Maddie, this one's for you. You mentioned you create content daily. How do you find inspiration for your content, and what resources do you use for your research?
Ooh, that's a really good question. One of my favourite things to do is actually thinking about new ideas for content. And I mean, it's an absolute beast, the social media machine. Like, I have to have a video every single day. So one of the things that I do is just read a lot. So I subscribe to AusSMC. I don't know if you guys are on that as well. It's like the Australian Science Media Centre, and they have press releases from different universities and different scientists who have new papers out. And yeah, I do read papers across different fields, and I also look at what people are doing across the ABC, like stories being covered by different journalists. I have a look on social media to see what's trending and what people are talking about. But I also really love having conversations with family and friends about things that matter to them. So I'll be like, is there anything interesting that you've heard about lately? Or is there anything that you don't understand right now that you're seeing in the news? Or is there anything that would actually help your life? For example, I did a video about cleaning disgusting microwaves. It came because my mum had a really gross microwave. Sorry, Mum. And she was just telling me, are there some scientific things or scientific methods that we can use to clean?
Vinegar?
Yes, I did it.
Yeah.
And exactly. It worked so well. And I had to test it myself. But I think if you have that litmus test of talking to family and friends particularly, and like seeing if it's something that matters to them and they're interested in, I think that's great, because then you can see that the information and the content will resonate. or talking to your target audience, whoever that is. Maybe that's people within your
Can you
organisation.
apply the pub test to this? Is it still work?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you could just go to a random pub and just start talking. Like, I did that for a science festival recently. It was really fun. So I'm not saying you all have to do that, but it's a good way.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely talk to people in your lives or in your target audiences to see if there are topics that they're interested in or questions that they have unanswered. Yeah.
Great. This next one is for either of you. In working for government, we are told to restrict what we say about work on social media. We often require executive approvals to present a paper. How can we change this?
Well, we can probably both answer it. You're working for the ABC at the moment. There are strict guidelines around what you can and can't do. Did you want to talk about that?
I definitely see that there are some restrictions there, but one thing that is good is just working really proactively with your organisation. So having a relationship with whoever that person is who needs to approve the particular content, giving them a heads up on content that you might be developing or sort of might be in the pipeline. So for example, let's say you want to do a social media post about PFAS. Maybe it's talking to your organisation about what you think could go in that post and what the messaging will be and what tone you'll be using, because then I think it will prevent you getting a surprise at the end when you've already done all of the amazing work and then they say, oh, we need you to change X, Y, Z. So yeah, I think it's having that proactive relationship. And then I think if you are really proactive about talking in your organisation about the communication that you're doing on social media, then it will also kind of influence the culture a little bit too, where people are more accepting of this and more encouraging of this as well.
Definitely. So I would just recommend that the heads up is really important. So if you're creating the content, if you've got a client that's involved or a stakeholder that's really important, absolutely giving them a heads up so that they are aware that that might drop at a certain time, and to know if there's a red flag issue, you know it in advance. When I talked about visibility on the agenda, this is also sometimes where people can say we have a timing issue with that, and maybe what you can do is hold that information until a later date, get all your assets ready so you're ready to go and communicate at the appropriate time and everyone understands it within the team. Why it's being timed that way, and it might be discussed retrospectively, and that can also be really powerful. But I think importantly, it's kind of discussed and there's a little plan around it. That's the top tip.
One final question before we wrap this up. Accreditation is behind the scenes. Other than a huge ad campaign, is there anything we can do to increase public awareness?
Yes. Can I just add to start with that, to say that every single person here that works in the accreditation space has a role to play. So everyone has a part to play in raising the visibility and the awareness of an organisation that you work for. So don't just think it's someone else's job. It's not. Every single person has an opportunity to describe what they do in a beautiful Maddie way and really get people engaged. And that comes with a little practice. So you don't need to know the answer to how you can describe what you do in a better, more compelling way. You just need to learn a little bit more about it, and then practice it and workshop it with your friends, colleagues. How does this sound? How can I make it more engaging? How can I make it more relatable? And once you come up with what I call the one-liner, then you can kind of stick with it. You don't need to change it very much, but what it does is it rolls off your tongue, and then you can kind of contextualize it when you need it for certain audiences, and that absolutely works. And people who work in, they work on stage, they're comedians, they're presenters, they've practiced it, believe you me. They are not doing it for the first time when you hear it, but they have thought about it not once, but probably 100 times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to share a little story to end. The way that I actually met Jennifer Evans, CEO of NATA, was at an ABC radio show. So she was presenting about NATA and the importance of accreditation. And that was a national radio show. Hundreds of thousands of people would be listening. And it shows that there is a real interest in the importance of accreditation and what happens if it's not there and why it's so incredible and important in our lives. So I think that there are elements to your stories and the stories of your work that really are of interest to the public. It's just about framing. So I guess maybe it's not surprising, the ABC wouldn't give a platform to someone talking about accreditation unless that they thought that there was something interesting for the public and something valuable there. So I feel like if we can all think about ways to find the story and the framing and then share that with the public, like there's definitely a space for that. People are interested. It's just about finding the way to package that up and sell the messages to them. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Maddie. I'd be curious if this PA system is accredited as well. Please join me in thanking Karen and Maddie on that engaging conversation. Thank you.